Morning, Matt from New York Motor Club here with another episode of Garage419. Today I am joined by Jeff Cadavid from Kahn Design, Project Kahn. Welcome, Jeff.
Good morning. How are you, Matt?
Now, Kahn Design is essentially a coach builder for exotic cars, post-title exotic cars. Am I right?
That's a pretty good assessment, yeah.
So what would you say is your guys' specialty over there?
Well, Kahn Design is a British company. They've been around for about 15 years, and their specialty is, as you said, building accessories and accessorizing high-end exotics and luxury cars. So we have a specialty. Being an English company, we have a specialty with the British brands.
Okay, so Bentley, Aston Martin, Range Rover.
Exactly.
What did you say is your the most common car that you guys do? No, I mean the most frequently.
First and foremost, probably Land Rover.
Okay.
There's a lot of them running around the world, and especially in the United States.
Yeah.
Second after that would be Bentley, and right behind that would be Aston Martin.
Okay. What kind of person do you think would buy a $80,000 to $200,000 car and then go further with it in terms of aesthetics and coach building? And what's your target market for Kahn Design?
Well, we operate in a real small niche. We don't appeal usually to the people who are, for lack of a better way of putting it, pimping their rides. It's almost like a tailoring shop.
Yeah.
A person who's used to having custom things made. I actually had to answer this question for someone at a trade show, someone from the general press, and they said, well, why would somebody ask that same question you just did?
Yeah.
Why would somebody do that? And I said, well, it's the same reason someone spends $2 or $3 million in a house and then completely remodels their kitchen because they want it just the way they want it.
So it's just the kind of guy who wants everything how he wants it, and so do you build cars on an individual car level where it's like this guy wants this, so we're doing it that way? Yeah,
we're usually approached by a client who's we've seen an advert or a story about what you do, and we like your products, and let's start speccing out the project.
Now, I like where you're going with that because I like the idea of building something that's just for one person, the way they like it. There's other companies out there that are tuning exotics that have standard models. Like, for instance, in the news today is Brabus just came out with their new SL65 package. Obviously, big horsepower. Brabus is known for just putting giant power in these cars. What do you think about that?
Brabus is an amazing company. I've been lucky enough to get a tour of their facility, and they're one of the few guys out there who really do it right. They actually have engineers and testing. They really go through almost an OE level of preparation for their projects. So yeah, Brabus definitely 2 thumbs up.
And then they're also selling individual componentry if you wanted to do your car like that.
Well, Brabus has the same mentality that we do, which is they've built a brand. The Brabus brand is iconic, and like the way I like to think Kahn is, and so people put their products on it specifically because it's that brand's design.
I happen to like their cars. I mean, I rode in one once and it was just disturbingly fast. I mean, for a Mercedes, I mean, the thing was like 670 horsepower or whatever. It was nuts. How did 10, 15 years ago, no one was really tuning exotics to the level that people are doing it now? How did that really go from where it was in the 80s to today?
Well, certainly not here in the United States. In Europe, it's a longer history. If you go all the way back to the early days of motoring, when people would buy chassis from Bentley or from Duesenberg and have a custom body made. It would still be a Duesenberg, but it would be bodied by whatever particular company was doing it. You're right, it popped up in the late 70s, early 80s in Europe. People just wanted their cars to go faster, and the Europeans also had a sense of individuality.
What company do you think was the real pioneers of exotics tuning? Like AMG was one of the first big well-known ones.
Well, AMG, like a lot of tuners, AMG started off racing. AMG started off racing in the 60s, and then customers started bringing their road cars saying, hey, can you put your your performance parts onto our road cars? And so if you go back to they're one of the early ones. AC Schnitzer.
Alpina was out there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Lorenzo was another very early one.
Yeah.
Roof was an early one also.
What about Roof is a good example because they were starting with the real exotic cars to begin with. What about like the Lamborghini and Ferrari tuners? I remember Koenig from the 80s, but I don't remember, was there anything out there before that?
Not that I can think of. They were specializing in those Italian. I think, well, Italian tuning is kind of a newer development also. I think they've always been a bit sacrosanct. They've always looked at as pieces of art. Yeah. Rather than a baseline upon which to build like a Porsche or a BMW. Right. It's a bit more mechanical.
Well, also in the 80s, the production numbers on the Italian exotics were much smaller. Now with 6,000 360s a year, you know, were being made, and just as many, if not more, 430s and Gallardos. They're much less. They're still rare cars, but they're much less sacred than, you know, a Daytona Spider or so. You know what I mean?
It is absolutely a numbers game. The more people that became involved, now you still have that core of purists who don't touch my car.
Yeah.
But then out of that 4,000 people, you're going to have some of the fringes who are willing to play around.
I'm sure that there are plenty of options out there for every single customer. You know, from the guy, the purist who says this is art, I'm leaving it is, to, you know, someone like Hefner who was putting 1,000 horsepower twin turbo kits in Gallardos and Ford GTs and things like that. Coming up on Garage419, we're going to talk about the future of tuning exotic cars and how the tuners interact with the manufacturers to come up with a project that will really fit every type of customer. Stick around. Now, we're with Jeff Cadavid from Project Kahn Design, talking today about tuning exotic cars. How do the tuners interact with manufacturers to come up with really good packages for that kind of specialty market?
Well, it's been a long road to get to this point where they're even talking to the tuners. For a long time, they were not only against it, but they actively campaigned against some tuners with lawsuits and things like that. But
yeah, Ferrari and Koenig actually had a lawsuit back then, didn't they?
Ferrari still chases after, from what I've been hearing, they've been chasing after some aftermarket suppliers and really putting pressures on dealers.
Yeah.
But other manufacturers are realizing it's all about segmentation. They're doing it themselves with smaller and smaller niche vehicles, but it gets to a point where a manufacturer just can't build a small enough number of cars.
Right.
And so that's where the tuners start getting involved. And you get some people like Heiko Sportiv, it's a Volvo tuner.
Yeah.
They've got now official relationships with Volvo, which is a strange idea of Volvo tuning, but Volvo realized they have an expertise there. And then you've got on the domestic side, you've got a history with people like Roush.
Yeah, Roush and Saleen and Ford.
Yeah, and Callaway, going back to the 80s.
Definitely.
So it's basically, the relationship is getting stronger because the manufacturers realize people are doing it anyway. The customers are showing up to do this with these cars anyway, and it's all about moving metal.
Right. And not to mention, if you take something like AMG used to be a separate company, now it's fully integrated into Mercedes for a factory installed performance package, and then what you get is a full warranty also.
Exactly.
So that's where I think the AMG Mercedes relationship is kind of the optimum integration of the tuner with the manufacturer.
It isn't. It's funny that you say that because it isn't necessarily with the tuners themselves.
Yeah.
Tuners are generally created by guys with egos in vision and in drive.
Yeah.
And so being swallowed up by a manufacturer, Mr. Offrecht certainly got a nice check for giving up his company to Mercedes-Benz. But if you talk to most of the big tuners, they'd love to have a closer relationship, but not too close. They'd have some freedom to do what they want to do.
Yeah, because I mean, I guess if you're starting with a base platform of one of those cars, you really want to have the creativity to take it in the direction you want to go, and not have the corporate guys upstairs saying, "Oh, that's not conservative enough for our customer." And
then you have to worry about jumping through all kinds of regulatory hoops if you get too close.
Yeah, I hear you. What about where is this going? I mean, the economy worldwide is down a bit. People aren't having as much crazy kind of money to throw around. Plus, we've got alternative power sources and hybrid and diesels and everything. Where is that going to leave the exotic tuning industry?
Well, that's another really interesting subject because it's kind of like, who knows? But there is some history to this. If you look at tuning itself, they've gone through, like every other element of social styles. You have conservative and then you have craziness.
Yeah. And
we are getting more pressure in the fattest part of the market. The people who are able to afford a mid-level exotic car, not exotic, luxury car, BMWs or
BMW or a base Porsche or whatever.
They're going to skip the $3,000 wheels or the $4,000 body package because they can't afford it. Now, our company, Kahn Design, works on the very high end. So we don't see that as much. We actually have a big sales.
The oil sheiks are still doing well.
Yeah, and the guys who are selling the oil here, right? Yeah. And the pharmaceutical companies and things like that. So there's still a lot of people who have money on the high end, but the middle end is going to be pinched. Now, what that does to styles, what that does to development, because it's the bigger part of the market that really drives manufacturing and drives costs down.
Yeah.
It remains to be seen. And then, as you mentioned, with hybrids coming up, or even more interesting, diesels.
Yeah.
We're going to see more diesels in the United States, and diesel tuning is really big in Europe. So
yeah, I mean, with software on a diesel, just software, you can get giant amounts of torque out of those things. So I especially, you know, Audi is pioneering that with their race cars as well as the R8 concept car. And I mean, you've even got other you know, manufacturers exploring diesel options now. But if the rich are staying rich and the middle ground is kind of dropping out, does that mean that companies like Kahn and like BFF and Roof, are they going to want to push more of the super high market because that's what people can still afford?
Well, those companies are already there, will stay there. Like you said, like Kahn Design or BF Performance or things like that. What's going to be interesting to see is, let's say 18 months out, how many of the smaller companies and the guys who relied on the mass market, how many are still going to be around in 18 months? I don't have high hopes for a lot of them.
No, that's sad because I'm sure a lot of them have good ideas and good intentions and just not the capital to stick it out.
Well, that just means 18 months from now some new guys will pop up. We'll get some fresh
and your
ideas.
business, you'll take some of their business, I'm sure.
Well, I don't want to capitalize anybody's downfall.
Yeah, I hear that. Jeff, thanks so much for being on the show. We'll revisit this issue and see how the market is going. And thanks for watching Garage419. Peace.